In Python, we have two types of variables: local variables with the function scope and global variables with the file scope. So in this example, this message variable is a local variable in the greet function. Its scope is the greet function, so we can access it anywhere in this function. Now in Python, unlike languages like C# or JavaScript, we don't have block level scope. So if we define this variable inside of an if block, it is still accessible outside of that block. Let me show you. So here I'm going to add if true colon. Inside of this if block, we're defining the message variable, but it's still accessible outside of the if block. So here we can print message. The same applies if we have a loop here, a for loop or a while loop. So in Python, we don't have block level scope. No matter where we define a variable in a function, it is always accessible in that function after it is defined. So that's all about our local variables. Now let's talk about global variables. If we put this message variable outside of this function, now it's a global variable, so it's accessible anywhere in this file, in any functions. So here in the greet function, we can print it on the terminal. Let's take a look. So here we call greet, run the program, we get A. Now let me show you something interesting. Here in the greet function, I'm going to assign a new value to the message variable. Let's set it to B. Run the program again. Obviously, we get B. However, if I bring this print statement outside of this function and run the program again, let's see what happens. We get A. What's going on here? Didn't we change the value of the message variable? Not really. In this case, this message variable becomes a local variable in the greet function because by default, Python enforces good programming practices. As you probably know, global variables are evil. We shouldn't change them in a function because this can cause a side effect in other functions. So in this case, when Python interpreter sees line 5, it will create a new local variable called message, even though it has the same name as our global variable on line 1. These two are completely separate. Now, I've seen some tutorials and books teaching you bad programming practices. They show you how to modify the value of a global variable inside of a function. So this is how we do it. We use the global keyword and reference the message variable. When Python interpreter sees this, it will realize that in this function, we don't want to create a local variable. We want to use the global message variable that we defined earlier. Now, if we run this code, instead of A, we're going to get B, because the changes will be visible after we exit this function. And that is the reason I said you should avoid using global variables, or if you really want to use them, make sure not to modify them inside of a function, because this can create a side effect in other functions. Maybe other functions rely on the original value of that variable. So, avoid using the global statement. It's a bad practice. It's evil.